new ideas into bombers and monoplane construction for the Air Corps bomber. Oh, our guest speaker has arrived. I want you all to pay close attention to him. He has a special story just for you.
Good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon.
How many have heard of the Tuskegee Airmen? None? This is what we're going to talk about this afternoon.
Bunker Hill, Gettysburg, Normandy, all defining symbols of what constitutes America's spirit. Moulton Field, a long ago decommissioned airbase, is not a landmark many would think of when considering our nation's history. Yet, here is where a group of men stood against the racial tyranny of America and trained to fight for its freedom. Here, the Tuskegee Airmen, these red-tailed angels of the sky, were to become the miracle this country didn't know it needed. Black men are cowards, a subspecies of the human race. The authors of these words? Our own armed services. These conclusions are the product of a study from 1925 entitled The Use of Negro Manpower in War.
And that report indicated that blacks were not competent to be officers. And there was some question about the fighting capacity of blacks.
It is an unforgiving example of our country's not-so-distant past that saw us as a divided nation. At the time, most institutions were segregated, including the armed forces. In spite of the desire of African Americans to fly, it was surmised that they were ill-equipped to do so, especially in combat. The genesis of the Tuskegee Airmen can be credited to a number of contributing factors. Perhaps the world finally relented to the pressures of the black community's leadership. Perhaps it was a test just to prove black men were incapable of succeeding as fighter pilots. It also may have been a political gimmick. President Roosevelt was in the middle of his re-election campaign. Needing the African American vote, the president in 1940 ordered the Army Air Corps to begin training black flyers. In July 1941, the first class of African American cadets began pilot training at Moulton Field in Tuskegee, Alabama. Even with this success, the racism of the time was against them. Many whites still doubted the flying abilities of African Americans. Enter into the fight, the First Lady.
Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of the president, she knew that there was a huge injustice being done to black Americans. And she found her way down here to Alabama, to Moulton Field. That one picture of Eleanor Roosevelt, taken while she was in one of the trainer planes with Chief Anderson, who was the chief pilot instructor. That one picture, I think, did as much, if not more, than any single other thing to show Americans just how foolish all this was. She's not scared of flying with these so-called incompetent, inferior beings. That picture flashed around the world, and it contributed immensely to the success of the Tuskegee Airmen.
For many of the new cadets, this adventure represented their first trip into the Deep South.
It was pretty tough because we were aware of the type of discrimination and so on, and certainly faced it on that train ride down when we crossed the Mason-Dixon line and had to change locations on the train because blacks had to be up behind the engine, not anywhere else.
Out of the first class of 13 cadets, 5 successfully completed the training, including Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who was to be the unit's commander. After suffering through 4 long, difficult years at the all-white West Point, Davis graduated at the top of his class. Longing for a chance to fly, Davis found it at Tuskegee.
Well, you know, he was just going through West Point. It took quite a special person to be able to stand what he had to take, and he did it, and that was part of his character. And so many of us respected him for that. Some of us, you might say, put him on a pedestal, and I guess deservedly so.
Once in training, times were not easy for the new pilot recruits.
But on base, we were absolutely segregated. We had a separate barracks, we had our orderly room, we had a separate mess hall, and we took our training separately. So the base was fully segregated. So that was the Army at that time.
But you knew that the elimination rate was quite high. Our elimination rate was like 65%. And you knew that any wrong move or any deficiency would get you thrown out. So you're always on your P's and Q's, and you're always tense. And that's of course is not comfortable.
The airmen trained and trained. Even after 4 fighter squadrons had been formed at Tuskegee, the War Department delayed their deployment. Morale sank as the airmen were anxious to prove themselves in combat. Finally, in 1943, the Tuskegee Airmen entered the war. Benjamin Davis and his highly trained squadron were deployed to Africa to begin operations against the Axis powers. Each man entered the conflict with the same emotions and fears that all soldiers do going to war. The airmen from Tuskegee, however, carried with them the hopes of all African Americans, for even if they knew it or not, the world was watching.
Black people in this community and around this country, they looked at the airmen and there was just so much pride. Black folk would flock out as close as they could to the airport to watch the training going on, to see them flying planes, and then to be able to get up close to them as they walked across the campus and to enter into conversation with them as opportunity permitted. Black folk were just enormously proud. They were proud of them. Black folk knew ahead of time what the outcome was going to be. They saw this as a fait accompli. They knew that there was no way that the airmen were going to be anything other than astonishingly heroic. And they were.
Flying older P-40s, the airmen were assigned mostly ground targets, attacking convoys, trains, and some shipping. In spite of a good record, the airmen's desire to fight was still in question by white commanding officers. A new mission allowed the airmen to silence their critics. In Europe, Davis and his fighters were assigned to escort bombers to targets in Munich and back. 39 Tuskegee Airmen fought off over 100 German fighters. The result of the mission? 5 enemy planes shot down. But most importantly, no bombers were lost to enemy fighters. This feat was no accident. Davis was adamant in the airmen's approach to bomber escort.
Ben Davis was a tough disciplinarian, and it was because of his requirements to follow the discipline that we established that record.
The reason I attribute that to, and all of us will say this, I'm certain, he was Colonel, he'll always be Colonel to me, although he's Colonel Davis insisted that we do not go off chasing after kills. The eyes of America and the world are on you, and anyone who takes off for personal aggrandizement will be court-martialed.
His instructions were simple. Never, ever leave the bombers. While pilots of other squadrons would at times break formation, pursuing targets to rack up victories, Davis forbid it. His reasoning was simple. Don't give anyone any reason to send the airmen home. It was soon after that the Tuskegee Airmen received a new airplane. The P-51 Mustang, considered by many as the supreme fighter of World War II. The introduction of the Mustang to the European theater helped turn the tide in the air war against the Axis powers. The Mustang became the signature aircraft of the Tuskegee Airmen.
So I flew all my combat missions in the P-51C and the P-51D. And I can tell you that it was a plane that you'd fall in love with.
Many squadrons in the war painted their tails with a distinctive marking for identification purposes. After obtaining their Mustangs, the airmen of Tuskegee painted their tails crimson red. Bomber crews they were protecting soon nicknamed them the Red-Tailed Angels. Even though racism and segregation still existed, the airmen's skills were respected. White bomber crews, some of whom would not bunk with the African-American pilots, began specifically requesting them as protective escorts.
They were very well qualified. You see, in the military, if you're not in action, you're in training. The Tuskegee Airmen were in training a long time. The officers in the Tuskegee Airmen were not 90-day wonders like some of those white officers. You see, 3 months, you become a troop leader, a 90-day wonder. Well, how much do you learn in 90 days? Over against what you learn in months and months of preparation. The Tuskegee Airmen were good.
It has been said the Tuskegee Airmen never lost a bomber to enemy fighters. Some contest this claim, saying they indeed lost a bomber or two. Regardless of which version is true, they not only proved they could fly, fight, and serve. Their skills and bravery proved their membership among history's aviation elite. The Tuskegee pilots helped win a world war. The airmen's struggle, however, was far from over. Racism was still rampant in post-war America. Upon their return, the airmen from Tuskegee were still in a segregated military.
Black folk were not only viewed as inferior, but also as people incapable of being taught the arts of war, or indeed the arts of civilization in the minds of many.
All of a sudden someone said, "Get up, move down the back." And I heard it. Then he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Did you hear what I said?" I looked up, and this is a scrawny little white guy with his girlfriend. He said, "I said, get up and move down the back of the bus." I laughed at him. I didn't know what the situation was in the back of the bus, but who the heck is he telling me to get up and move down to the back of the bus? So,
when we came back after World War II, white expectation was that things would return to what they had been before we left, just as had happened after World War I.
But I mean, it's sort of a dehumanizing experience. Here, you've come back from overseas, fighting for your country. You lost some of your buddies in the process. To encounter this, it's not right.
But always, the price has got to be paid somehow, and we need to find ways to open America up more to face its past so that it can face its future more courageously.
The men and women who went to war through Tuskegee were almost lost to history, forgotten to another time. Many history books don't even mention them.
Well, we were only known as Tuskegee Airmen since early 70s, say. But the reason we formed was before that time, many people said no blacks flew in World War II.
There are, however, people out there determined to teach history, determined to give a group their due, determined to tell the airmen's story. One group has decided to tell this story using an iconic symbol of World War II. The symbol came in the form of a P-51 Mustang, the frontline fighter of World War II. After the war, this particular Mustang was sold as surplus to Montana State University for $1. The aircraft was then towed to a resting place on the front lawn of the university's engineering building. It sat there for the next 20 years. David Swingle was an area resident of Bozeman and an admirer of the Mustang.
As I grew up with the plane was kind of ignored by everybody, but this campus has no tradition of vandalism. So the plane was left alone. And periodically somebody'd slap a coat of silver paint on it, but they'd usually leave the markings. They're decent enough not to paint over everything, including the star and the number on the tail.
The Mustang's period of slumber would change in 1965. Warbird flyer and restorer Lloyd Creek wanted to buy the aircraft and restore it.
We heard about the C model at the Bozeman College, and that they wanted to get rid of it, and they want to make the area into a parking lot, and they wanted to get rid of the Mustang, and they was taking bids. We got it for $1 bid. That didn't set well with the college at that time. They called me a few days later and said, you get the airplane out here in 24 hours or else you don't get it.
David Swingle one day noticed an increased interest in the Mustang.
And I noticed a lot of activity around the plane. And the cover, the sheet metal had been taken off the canopy, so I wanted to look inside it. The next day when I came back, there was this sound of metal saws.
I went out and I rented a skill saw from a local rental with a ceramic blade that you cut floor tile.
And they sawed off the wings just outboard of each of the landing gear. They put a pipe between the landing gear to keep them from collapsing.
I lifted up the tail and chained it up to the pickup, and we towed it to Billers. But I hated to cut the wings off, but I had to. Had I not have cut them off, it would have been sold to a salvage company,
In Billings, Lloyd welded the wings back on with hopes of putting the aircraft on display.
We wanted to put it on a static display in a climbing altitude, just as you come up the airport hill of the airport.
Due to some safety issues and local politics, the Mustang project languished. With her welded-on wings, the Mustang sat outside without a home for the next 5 years. The aircraft began her restoration journey in 1970 when Lloyd donated her to the Commemorative Air Force. The CAF is an organization dedicated to the preservation and flying of as many World War II aircraft as possible, with chapters all across the country. Since their creation in the 1950s, the CAF has amassed an air force of over 150 planes, some of which are the lone examples of that particular aircraft. A team from the CAF traveled from Texas to Montana. They disassembled the Mustang and shipped her to Texas, the CAF's home base. While awaiting her turn in the restoration line, Hurricane Beulah swept ashore. Until that point, the aircraft had a relatively strong, clean structure. The saltwater bath provided by Beulah began a destructive corrosion process, setting back the restoration many years. Over the next few years, the plane made pilgrimages into the hands of well-meaning but under-resourced CAF volunteers. First Minneapolis, then back to Texas, then to Iowa, where again the project languished as just a pile of parts. Finally, in the late 80s, the southern Minnesota wing of the CAF stepped in.
The Minnesota wing had been involved in a 12-year restoration of Miss Mitchell, which was the first really ground-up restoration of a B-25. Kind of redefined the standard of warbird restorations. And the B-25 project was winding down. The Minnesota wing was looking for another project, and they acquired the C model project, and they were going to take that project on.
Red Tail project director Doug Rosenthal began flying in his spare time during college. His hobby, though, quickly developed into an obsession.
It's something that I feel very passionately about and commit a lot of time to, but it's the rewards are just enormous for me.
As is usually the case, Doug's involvement with warbirds stemmed from being at the right place at the right time.
I went up there and they were in the process of restoring this beautiful B-25 Miss Mitchell. And I walked in the door and met some of the folks, and they realized I was a DC-3 co-pilot and a Beech 18 pilot, and they just welcomed me with open arms. They needed somebody that had round engine and experience, and I got involved in the Minnesota wing of the CAF, and one thing led to another, and it's just been a great ride. I've had some incredible experiences being able to fly these old airplanes.
Maintenance work with the B-25 cropped up, causing the Mustang project to be once again pushed aside. This break in the restoration, however, allowed the CAF to consider which veterans they would honor with the Mustang.
We knew it was going to be a very rare example for an aircraft, and by virtue thereof, it was important for us to seek out an appropriate history to carry forward with the aircraft as we restored it. A couple of our members very early on in the project stumbled upon the story of the Tuskegee Airmen and were very moved by it.
While the Tuskegee Airmen flew several types of fighters in the war, this type of Mustang, a Razorback C model, was considered to be their signature aircraft.
This was a very appropriate story to bring to light, especially when it was discovered that the Miss Mitchell served in the same theater of combat at the same time that the Tuskegee Airmen served in North Africa, Italy, and all the way to Germany, and on some of the most dangerous missions. So there's a real interesting parallel that we believed would tell a very powerful story with a B-25 being escorted by a red-tailed Mustang. And that was where the idea began. And what's happened since then has really been amazing.
With the Tuskegee Airmen now as a focus, restoration of the Mustang continued, but still at a slow pace. The project, though, was about to get a new leader. A retired naval aviator and businessman, Don Hines was a fixture at the CAF Minnesota Airport. Aviation was always a priority for him and his family. Two of Don's boys followed their father into the military and inherited his love of aviation.
We just flew all the time. There was four boys when we split out and kind of went our ways in college and in the Marines. Two of us were pilots in the Marine Corps, and when it was time for Thanksgiving or Christmas, we were back in Minnesota, we'd go jump in the airplanes and 180 out, fights on at the merge. I'm an officer in the Marine Corps, and they call me captain, and I fly F-18s. One of the first things I remember seeing on TV was Dad had some 8mm footage of the carrier deck launching airplanes off the pointy end. And from that day, I wanted to be a pilot.
Being retired and his family doing well, Don Hines looked for a new project.
It was 1992 when he went down to Texas. While he was down there, one of his friends, an old Navy friend from the squadron, flew a T-6. And so he jumped in the T-6 and went for a ride. Mom told me years later that he had told Mom, I'm going to get one of those one day.
While not even a CAF member, Don plunged headfirst into the Red Tail project with all the energy and resources he had.
He heard about the Mustang, and I think what really spurred him towards the Red Tail project was when the decision was made to model it after the Tuskegee Airmen, and that there was going to be an education process, there was going to be a story that was going to be told with this airplane. It wasn't just a bunch of old guys flying airplanes because it's cool. It was the ability for this airplane to tell a story.
Don's enthusiasm and his leadership ability was incredibly infectious. And, you know, when I saw Don was getting involved, I knew that was something I wanted to be a part of. So, you know, I started putting some energy and time and focus into the Red Tail project. And in short order, we had to fly an airplane.
A full rebuild of the wings was in order, largely due to their being sawed off back in Montana. This, along with many other technical challenges, proved to be too much for the small volunteer organization.
So Don figured out early on that we were going to have to contract out for the restoration of the Mustang, and the logical place to do that was here in North Dakota.
Within an hour drive from Fargo, North Dakota, are two of the world's premier warbird restoration shops. One run by Gerry Beck, the other belonging to Bob Odegaard. Both men entered aviation as crop dusters. Both now are world-renowned for their work and their aircraft. Bob is the owner and pilot of the world-famous Super Corsair Race 57. Gerry, as a Mustang specialist, has just finished this very rare P-51A Mustang.
You know, they work together as a team. This was clearly the place to come to get the project finished. It was close, and these guys just do incredible work.
With Odegaard's shop to rebuild the wings, Beck's shop would concentrate on cleaning and rebuilding fuselage parts damaged by the hurricane.
Well, there's always challenges. Every day there's a new challenge in this business. And the parts, some of the parts aren't available. You have to figure out techniques and ways to make those parts. And it really wouldn't be an issue if you were going to make thousands of them, but in our world, you know, we get excited if we get to make 10 of something.
Costs for the rebuild were mounting to over $350,000. The Red Tail project met this cost by obtaining grants and donations large and small. This effort, along with many volunteer hours and expert craftsmanship, pulled an antique airplane from the grave of history.
The aircraft first flew in 2001 in North Dakota. It was a wonderful day. We actually gained a new CAF member that day. I believe Mr. Odegaard joined specifically for that purpose. Every time I see an airplane get worked on, it's always encouraging to see the mechanic or the person most responsible for its safe operation take that first flight. So it was nice to see that that was an honor that Bob got to have.
It was then time for the newly rebuilt P-51, now named Tuskegee Airmen, to begin her mission. Flying at air shows nationwide, Tuskegee Airmen became one of the most visible and most photographed planes in the country. The story of her namesake was finally being heard.
Well, it's important as a symbol of us. We were involved, and we feel it keeps alive or spreads the word as to what we did and the importance of it. And I just love that portion of it, the fact that one of our airplanes still flying after all these years.
Traveling across the country, the aircraft Tuskegee Airmen educated and inspired.
For every one of the stories we hear, there's 1,000 stories that we never heard. Every once in a while, as the pilot of the airplane, I was fortunate enough that someone would come and share. But most of the stories happened at home that night over dinner, when a young kid asked his mother, what were the Tuskegee Airmen about? What did they stand for?
From my conversation with Dad, the kids' eyes were this big, and there were original Tuskegee Airmen that were showing up at these air shows, and nobody knew them from Adam, that they had gone through what they went through 50 years ago. And he said that was the best part of the job, was to see A, the kids show up, and then B, the original Tuskegee Airmen. I flew one of these 50 years ago. Oh, well, come on over, let's have a look.
As Don and the Mustang's other pilots flew her to dozens of air shows, thousands of people became informed about the airmen from Tuskegee. As project leader, Don Hines was made an honorary Tuskegee Airman.
One of the accolades was the Red Tail Project, the Don Hines, that have done more to create awareness of the Tuskegee Airmen. And they've done more in the past 2 years than we've done in the past 50. So yeah, they got a lot of people to open their eyes.
Anybody that flies old airplanes has to come to a realization there's risk associated with what we do. I was flying a B-25. I was talking to Don on the radio.
I was at the air show in the tent. Don Hines had instructed me to watch his flight for a debrief, and he wanted me to tell him what I thought about his display.
When he said that his engine was going away. And it was just sheer disbelief.
And in the turn, I saw the speed start to dissipate. And then as he lined up on a extended final, I realized that he was sinking and there was a problem. And I saw him disappear into the trees.
I was in the landing process. I remember talking to Don. I have no memory of landing the B-25 that I was flying. I do remember rolling out on the runway. I told him if he needed the runway, I'd go on the grass, but he was on the ground by then.
So now I was here, I got a phone call that Dad had an accident in the Mustang, and that was all we were told at that time. I was here, my brother Kelly lives just up there a little bit, and Mom just said we needed to come home.
That day in Wisconsin, Don Hines was flying his usual performance in front of the crowd at the Red Wing Air Show. While flying the routine, the Mustang had an engine failure, causing Don to make a forced landing in a residential neighborhood.
The plane came in heading for the runway, and he had to fly over some pine trees and under some power lines, and also he landed in the backyard of some houses. And the way it looked to me, he did quite a job missing quite a few trees, not hitting the power lines, and most importantly, missing houses. It looked like he did quite a job protecting other people that may have been in the area, and to put that bird on the ground.
Don was rescued from the Mustang and life-flighted to the hospital. The nature of his injuries were severe, however. Don Hines passed away the following day.
Beyond losing a member and beyond losing a teammate on the Red Tail Project, we lost a great leader. He was the most charismatic and yet humble and self-sacrificing person I've ever had the privilege of working with.
Most of our projects that we do, the airplanes that we rebuild, are a long-term deal. I mean, it's not like somebody coming in for an oil change. It's a deal where you get to know these people, they become really close friends, and you work with them, you understand them, you meet their families, they become part of our family, so to speak. And Don was a tremendous man. I mean, he had a vision, and he was really a great person to work with. And yeah, I guess you'd say we got pretty close to him.
At Don's memorial service, General Urschler spoke and painted a vision for all of us. And it was a vision of clarity and focus and hope. And what he said was, won't it be a great day when this airplane flies again with a member of the Hines family at the controls?
At that time, Don's son Kelly was the apparent successor to fly the rebuilt Mustang. Almost 1 year after his father's crash, Marine Captain Kelly Hines was killed in his FA-18 Hornet while serving in Iraq.
I think it's the principle involved of living a certain way. If you want to take risks in life, then you have to wake up every day and proceed with what you perceive to be living. And for me, that's involves flying. So after Dad died, there was and then Kelly, there was just talk of no more flying. My fear is that it's a slippery slope. If you say, okay, I'm not going to fly today, I'm going to quit flying because there's risk involved, then what else are you not going to do? I love flying. It's taken a lot from us, but it's us as a family, but it's also given us so much in terms of memories and just a way of growing up. Yeah.
Had the accident occurred 10 flight minutes previous, I'd have been flying the airplane. I flew the airplane the night before, and then that morning Don got up, and just shortly after takeoff the accident occurred. If the tables were turned, which they very easily could have been, there's no question in my mind about what I would have wanted to have happen. The airplane needs to fly. These airplanes are an incredibly persuasive and effective tool to inspire young people. Not all young people. I mean, there are kids out there that basketball is the thing that does it for them. There are others out there that race cars do it for them. But I know personally it was airplanes that did it for me. And if that's 1 in 100, or 10 in 100, or 1 in 1,000, if taking these airplanes out is an inspirational tool that causes these kids to realize their potential and realize there is a place on this planet where they can be a contributing member of society, then whatever it costs is cheap.
Don died doing what he believed in, and that was his passion, and we would fail Don if we allowed the airplane to not fly again.
Well, I know Dad would have wanted it that way, and as a family, we'd like to see it fly again. Absolutely.
As before, the restoration road for the Mustang runs through North Dakota.
That was really a pretty easy decision. The airplane was built here the first time. This is one of the premier Mustang restoration shops in the country, probably in the world.
After the accident, the aircraft was transported once again to Gerry Beck's shop, where reconstruction soon began.
mean, we're poised to do another one. And we've already started on a lot of the components and pieces.
The rebuilding of the Mustang may prove easier this time around as they apply lessons and tools forged from the first restoration.
When we were doing the restoration on the C model Mustang, we thought it prudent at that point to at least duplicate the tooling that we would need if we ever came across a project similar to that again.
We have a group of about 5, 6 volunteers that come up on a semi-regular basis and help out. And then been a great bunch of guys. You know, they didn't get a whole lot of hands-on experience with the Mustang when it was down in St. Paul, so now they're getting a chance to really get to know the detail of the airplane.
I'm a machinist by trade and have been a mechanic all my life on this kind of stuff, and race cars, that sort of thing. So it all sort of pulls together that, you know, we've got skills in other areas of our lives that really work together very well to work with Mark and Gerry, and they can just point and shoot, you know, you guys, you know, do this, do this, do this, and they've got confidence in us that we can get it done.
And again, this is a combination of what was left over from the previous, and then those over there are templates from, again, the A model and the C model. So after looking at the microfiche, with all the drawings, I mean, that's pretty small print. The drawings used to be like the size of the wall, full size. Lots of fun. I think a lot of it was Don to begin with, then learning about the Tuskegees and what they did, and knowing Don and what his drive was in this. That's kind of why I got involved with it. And it was pretty tough coming home after that weekend and dealing with that. And I've always been in the planes for one reason or another. And my wife said, you know, well, maybe this is that dream you've been trying to find. So she's put up with me coming up here for 2 years, once a month for a weekend, and never complains. And so it's pretty good. Can't complain about it.
It was determined that the accident was caused by a nut coming loose near the engine, allowing the camshaft to begin wearing away the gears that connect to the cylinders. After enough was worn away, the engine lost power.
Not too long prior to that point, I think it was less than 30 hours or nearly 30 hours before that, we had the airplane here to do the inspection on it. And we had done the inspection and checked all of the filters and all of the screens, and there was no presence of any metal or anything in the oil system, in the oil filters, that would give you a hint that there was something going wrong with the engine. Yet, after the accident, when we took the engine apart and checked those filters and screens, they were completely packed with metal. So the engine was failing. Sometime beyond that 30-hour period, it started to fail. I don't know if it was 20 minutes before or an hour before or 5 hours before. It was failing, and nobody had any way of knowing until the day that the engine quit.
Having learned the cause, Gerry Beck has provided a remedy for this and all other Mustangs.
It's not a new idea, it's a new adaptation of an existing idea, but we built a filter that filters the oil as it leaves the engine. And it's not really meant to be a filter, it's meant to be an early warning device. And if that filter starts to clog with contamination, whether it be metal or whatever, the oil will then have to bypass that filter screen. It will then illuminate a light on the instrument panel that says your oil system has gone into a bypass condition. It's time to check. So we build that and supply that for the Mustangs now that use the Rolls-Royce engine, and we have named it the Heinz filter after Don Heinz. And I'm confident, had Don had that on the airplane, he'd still be with us here today.
In spite of the good intentions of the Red-tailed Project, they have experienced their share of difficulty, of disappointment, and of loss. Why do they continue?
Amidst the biggest odds against them in the world, the Tuskegee Airmen were able to prove to the world that they could do something. They could fly airplanes. They could work on airplanes. And that is a story that needs to be told to inspire younger generations.
My feeling about the Red Tail project is that it's a very, very valuable and essential program.
When you get around young people, nothing greater than, you can show them a picture of a P-51, but to be able to go out there and walk around one, look at its painting, if you will, kick the tires, there's still an importance is understanding and knowing history, and that's what that represents, but at the same time to tie an educational to it that challenges the youngsters to prepare themselves for their future and the future of the country is just pretty hard to beat.
I wasn't there, but I have this image, and my mom said that she just saw that plane just fall out of the sky. So to see it take off again, it'll be Dad's legacy to be flying again.
We'll do anything we can to get that airplane back in the air. And I think that's the way that the people that work with us here, Mark and Scott and all of the guys, they're willing to do what it takes to make it happen again.
Five long years have passed since the accident that destroyed the Red Tail and claimed the life of Don Hines. Once again, the Mustang is prepped for flight by the restorers of Tri-State.
Don had the idea and the funding behind it, and it was Gerry's shop, and it's like, okay, we have this airplane to build, let's build it.
Finished components, painted parts, and refurbished systems are now finally coming together. For 3 years, steady progress was made on restoring the aircraft. Then, tragedy struck the project once again.
2 years ago, Beck was participating in an air show activity and was killed there. And he was flying his A model Mustang, which was, pretty near and dear to him.
After the accident, the question is, well, what's going to happen to Tri-State Aviation? And it's like, well, we have to continue on.
We're still here. The capabilities are still here. The vision that he had is, I think, with us. I think we hold that yet. And so that helped in moving forward with the CAF project as well, with the Red Tail. And it really, that project is so huge that it's just been probably an honor for all of us to be part of that.
Tri-State pressed on to complete the Mustang, along with the help of Red Tail Project volunteers.
Yeah, I've got a pretty good crew. We don't really have an exact count. There's 5 or 6 guys that are kind of my key guys, kind of the main guys that have come up here on a regular basis, and been a great help with the project. The thing that I like about it the most, though, too, it's kind of a learning experience. These are the guys that are going to help maintain the airplane once it's flying, and to get the experience of working with the airplane and being all the way down to the minute detail of it to understand how the systems work is I think, going to be a great value to the wing down there to have those people.
As the first flight date nears, the focus and work intensifies.
It's hard to focus on a project and to get it to the finish, and the excitement builds and everybody wants to see it fly, and you know, we get a lot of people come in to want to see how the project's coming. They want to be here to see it fly. Gerry's thought was always, well, we're going to sneak it out the back door and we're going to fly it once, and then we're going to call them up and say, okay, we're ready to fly. Well, we didn't get that luxury this time, and it gets a little tense when you're trying to finish the last details, and there's things you know you have to concentrate on and do it just right. And when you have a whole bunch of people standing over you, looking at you, questioning whether you're going to be able to do it right or not, it kind of wears on a person, and tempers get a little short. But
among the crowd of visitors, a guest with a special connection to the project has arrived.
I was amazed to see Ben Hines. I'd heard that he was coming, and when he walked into the shop, I was just elated to see him.
Ben Hines has come to see his father's dream once again take flight.
To me, that was huge. It made, for myself personally, it made it more of a, you know, somewhat of a true mission accomplished.
After a long restoration road, it is finally time to do some flying.
Wabanon traffic, Mustang 61429, departing runway 15 Wabanon.
You know, it continues. This airplane is nicer than it was last time. That's an incredible testament to Tri-State, to Beck, to Cindy, to all the people that Beck chose to be part of his team here.
I mean, and it's exciting for me too, of course. I mean, it's kind of one of those you like to see the project through and see it get done and get it out there so people can enjoy it.
It was pretty spontaneously amazing and exhilarating, and those that have experienced a child coming into the world, I'm sure that you could equate it to that. And it was absolutely beautiful.
It's bittersweet in a way. The plane took on it's a story larger than itself. The story of the Tuskegee Airmen, the story that the project wants to tell, it's almost expanded beyond the airplane. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, was to be a part of that and to let the project know that we as a family are still supporting the story that they want to tell.
If that airplane was restored like it is and put in a museum somewhere, the number of people that would get to see it would be really small. And when you actually get to see it fly, then everybody, wow, that's cool, you know, that's exciting.
I'm just looking forward now to, now that the aircraft is flying and will be back in the air, is trying to put the whole project together, the Red Tail project, so that they can truly go out and accomplish their mission in telling about the Tuskegee Airmen and just the mission about what are you going to do with your life.
We can celebrate, rejoice, enjoy for a little while, but the real mission is to tell the story of the Tuskegee Airmen and to inspire young people to realize that they can be whatever they dream. And that's what Don set out to do. And so this is just the first step, albeit a big one, in a long journey. And knowing Don as I do, he's tapping me on the shoulder saying, okay, now let's get to work.